because she obeyed the Lord and went back to Sarah and put up with the ill will treatment after God asked her to. What's up, geeks? It's your guy Q here, aka JGTV, and we are back with another one, guys. And today we are still in our trauma series, talking about trauma, but today we are going to be focusing on a brand new person, and we're going to be talking about Hagar. So Hagar is Sarah, who is Abraham's wife. Hagar is Sarah's maidservant. So there's plenty of trauma there to talk about. Let's get right into it. So when we first see Hagar in the Bible, we're about in Genesis chapter 16. And what we see here is that Hagar becomes pregnant with a son who she is going to name Ishmael, and Abraham is the father. Now, you might be thinking to yourself, wait a minute, how is Abraham the father? And this is Sarah's husband, right? Sarah and Abraham. Yes. So at some point, God appears to Abraham, and he tells Abraham, at the time he's Abram, but he tells Abraham, later on his name is changed, that you're going to have a son. After God leaves Abraham, after appearing to him, some time goes by, and Sarah says to her husband, hey, the Lord has prevented me from having children, so I'm going to give you my servant Hagar, and maybe she will bear you children for me. So she gives Hagar to Abraham. He takes her, he sleeps with her, and she later on gets pregnant. Now, when Hagar becomes pregnant, she does start to treat Sarah kind of ill will. You know, she kind of finds out she's pregnant, so she kind of starts acting like, all right, well, yeah, Abraham got me pregnant and you're still not pregnant, so yeah, I'm about to try to like run this, like I'm about to try to treat you any kind of way and kind of be the queen of this right here, right? So Sarah's not having it, and she goes to Abraham, complains, and Abraham says, you know, do what you will with her. So Sarah starts to treat her really badly. Hagar runs away, and it is here when she finds out she's pregnant, because the Lord appears to her and asks her, you know, where did you come from? Where are you going? And she explains, like, I'm coming from my mistress Sarah, who's treated me badly. And it's depending on what translation you read, I love what this says. It says, go back to your mistress and deal with her punishment, or deal with her harsh treatment towards you. It's crazy because, or put up with it. It's crazy because, like, God knew that this was something that Hagar couldn't stand. But the Lord tells her to return to Sarah and deal with the bad treatment. So, nonetheless, Hagar goes back. You know, she ends up giving birth to Ishmael, and that's what Abraham names him. And then later on, like sometime later, Sarah then becomes pregnant with Isaac. Now, when it comes to Hagar, what kind of trauma do we necessarily see in Hagar's life, right? Well, first of all, being a maidservant, being a servant or a slave, would definitely, it would definitely mean that she was taken from her family, right? Or that she could have possibly been brought from her family, sold to their family, taken from her family. But this is the kind of verbiage that would be used for someone who would be a servant, a maidservant, or a slave at this time. So there's some trauma there, being separated from your family and having to live in a household where you now are under someone else and you're not around your mother or your father or your siblings any longer, right? We also kind of see here a unwanted pregnancy, if you will, right? We don't see anywhere in scripture where Hagar is asking Abraham to get her pregnant, right? Or we don't see anywhere where she's offering herself necessarily to Sarah to say, hey, you know, you can use me as this. But what we do know is that if someone was a servant at that time, they could be used as that. So we do know that someone at that time could be given away, or they were treated as property. Like someone could say, hey, I'm going to give you my servant, and my servant will bear children for me. And we see this a lot, especially in the Old Testament throughout scripture. So we know that a servant did deal with treatment like that. When Sarah realizes that some time is passing by and she's unable to have children with Abraham, she says, I will give you my servant and maybe she will bear children for me. So Hagar goes through with this, but there's nothing in the text necessarily insinuating that she wanted this or that she was okay with this. Yes, it seems she was a willing participant, but we just don't see any supporting text for that part. So it's safe to say that at first this could have been something that Hagar maybe was like, oh wow, I'm really gonna have to do this. You know, it's not like at the time Abraham was a 35-year-old guy or a 25-year-old guy. You know, he's a pretty old dude at this time, you know, so it's probably not something she was necessarily looking forward to anyway, but because she was Sarah's servant, you know, she was given away. We also have the constant mistreatment that she faces from Sarah while she's pregnant. That's traumatic in itself, right? You don't want to stress a pregnant woman out. So she's sitting there and Sarah's mistreating her. And yes, it is because Hagar begins to treat her a little ill-willed because she's pregnant. But Sarah just kind of goes ham to the point where Hagar runs away to the wilderness. And this is where she's able to see God, and God tells her she's pregnant to go back to Sarah. And then to top it all off, after some years go by and Sarah finally gets pregnant and has the promised child Isaac, right? When Isaac is later weaned off of his mother and they would throw a big festival when this would happen, we see in the story that Ishmael is making fun of his little brother Isaac during this celebratory event, and Sarah gets pissed. She's not having it. She basically tells Abraham, hey, tell your chick over there and her son, like, they gotta hit the road because he's not sharing any inheritance with my son Isaac. Like, she just basically goes all in and she's like, I want them out of here. And the scripture says that this really upset Abraham because Ishmael was his son, you know. So he consults with the Lord about it, and God tells Abraham that I will take care of Hagar and Ishmael. So Abraham sends them off. God tells Abraham to listen to what your wife says and that I will take care of Hagar and the boy. And Abraham sends them off, you know, with food and water, of course, but eventually that runs out. But nonetheless, he sends them off into the wilderness and they don't go back. This time when Hagar's in the wilderness with her son, they never return back. Actually, the scripture says that after Hagar's eyes was opened, because she actually parted ways with her son in the wilderness because he was crying out, the food and the water had run out, and she did not want to see the boy die. So the scripture says that she left him and she walked away so she couldn't hear the cries of the boy, but the Lord heard the cries of the boy. And this is where God opened Hagar's eyes to a well. She gives the boy something to drink, and the scripture says that he grew up and the Lord was with him, and the Lord did bless him. You know, he's a great nation. We know that Ishmael had 12 sons. You know, we know that he was a great nation, and God said that he would do this because he was Abraham's descendant. When God and Abraham are having a conversation, before Isaac is born, Abraham says to God, if only you would consider Ishmael, you know, depending on what translation you're reading. And God says, because I've heard your request, like, I will bless him. So, you know, Hagar's son does get blessed, but man, look at all of the trauma they have to go through. Now she's like a single woman in the wilderness with her son, and they're about to die. And all the way to the point where she's so convinced they're gonna die, like she leaves him there and goes away so she can't hear him crying. And I think that in itself is just heartbreaking to deal with, because that is a traumatic event that I know she probably never forgot, no matter how old she got or what they went through or she went through. You know, even though God did restore her son and make a great nation out of him and provided for Hagar and Ishmael, this was some pretty traumatic events for Hagar to have faced to still serve God. You know, you would think at some point in the wilderness she would not want to have anything to do with God, because now the man who got her pregnant, right, and made her have a son, now he's basically letting his wife tell him to kick her out, and it doesn't matter what happens to them. And I know that was pretty heartbreaking for her. But as we see in scripture, God definitely provides for Ishmael. You know, he's a great nation. He has a lot of descendants, just like Isaac did. And we just know that God chose to put Isaac and Abraham in that lineage that would lead to Jesus Christ. But Ishmael was in fact blessed. So we see Hagar facing some pretty traumatic events here, from all the way of being a slave, all the way up until the point of having a child by someone who she doesn't necessarily says, hey, I want to have children with you, all the way to the point of running away while she's pregnant and having to go back and put up with ill will treatment because the Lord asked her to, and then getting sent out into the wilderness again to never come back, but for the Lord to ultimately bless her and her son. So I think we can learn a lot from Hagar here, because these are some pretty traumatic events, man or woman, but especially for a woman dealing with something like this, like how heartbreaking. And God still makes a great nation out of this woman's son and restores her and provides for them, takes care of them. They don't die in the wilderness. And I think that perseverance is something that we can look at when it does come to Hagar. It might not be something that's widely talked about, but it's definitely there, because she obeyed the Lord and went back to Sarah and put up with the ill will treatment after God asked her to. So I think this is something that we can all learn from when it comes to Hagar, that hey, someone might be treating you ill or ill-willed or really bad at the moment, but is God calling you to put up with that for a certain point or season or time to get through to that person through you? You know, what could the Lord be doing? So I hope you guys enjoyed this. Share this video with someone. Stay tuned for the trauma series, because the next person's coming right behind this. I'm not going to reveal it. You got to stay tuned. So take care of yourselves, guys. Take care of one another. What I always say, love yourselves, love one another, but most of all, love God. Peace.